Association over the course of this week as part of its annual Law Week under the theme, Building Bridges, Crime Prevention and Community Safety. The other initiatives were visits by members of the association to the 6 government-run primary schools to discuss crime and violence and its impact on our young people, particularly those in grades 5 and 6. And yesterday we held a radio discussion on Class FM in which we sought to clear up some of the misconceptions that are out there in the public domain concerning bail, sentencing, and the presumption of innocence. Tonight we will bring the curtain down on the public aspect of our Law Week with what we hope will be an open and honest discussion about the crime situation in Anguilla. I can recall when I arrived on these shores almost 25 years ago. Back then, and for many years afterwards, people still left their doors and their cars unlocked. Shootings were an anomaly, and gang-related violence was unknown. Yes, there were fights, and there were some drug-related incidents, mostly relating to marijuana possession, but nothing like what we are faced with now. In a report commissioned by the Gun and Violence Committee of the House of Assembly, it stated that between April 1, 2023 and March 31, 2024, we had 42 gun-related incidents, 5 of which resulted in murder. That represented an almost 30% increase in gun-related incidents and 40% increase in murder over the previous year. And we know that since that report, which ended at March 31st, we have had 4 more murders and several shootings, the latest one occurring last night. With this kind of statistic, Anguilla is unfortunately sitting firmly at the top percentile of crime levels. The last time I Googled, we were at number 4. That same report confirms something many of us always suspected, which is that the majority of our offenders are boys between the ages of 17 and 25. This, ladies and gentlemen, means that our children are being groomed to commit criminal activities. Where have we gone wrong as a society, and how do we correct it? Some have said that as a society, we have lost our moral compass. Is that so? And if it is so, whose fault is it? Is it that of our young people, or are they merely just products of their upbringing? And if they're products of their upbringing, does that mean that we as parents, or as a church, or as educator, or as society in general, have failed them? Others have said that the police is the reason we are in the situation we are in today, because there is a lack of trust and accountability. But is that a fair criticism of the police's efforts, bearing in mind that they need our help if they are to effectively curb crime? Are we playing our part? And of course, there are those who feel that the lawyers are part of the problem, because when the police manage to catch somebody, they get them off. Tonight, here to help us explore these issues and many others are our esteemed panelists. Each of them have something valuable to say as we explore the topic, crime and violence, causes, threats, and solutions. Our first panelist is Reverend Canon Reed Shalom Simon. Reverend Canon Reed Simon is a parish priest at the Pro-Cathedral of St. Mary with St. Augustine and St. Andrew. He holds a Master of Letters from the University of St. Andrews in Practical and Historical Theology, Bible and Contemporary World, and he also holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of the West Indies, Cayville campus, with a theology major and a minor in sociology. Canon Reed Simon is a trained mediator. He's the chairperson of the Anglican Peace and Justice Network and the founder and director of the Shalom Institute, an organization which provides counseling, capacity building, conflict resolution, mediation, and promotes human rights. Outside of his regular day's work, Canon Reed Simon is a member of Rotary International, Amnesty International, and Greenpeace, and as a lover of sports, especially basketball, cricket, soccer, and anything having to do with the sea. Last but by no means least, he is married to Turkessa Simon, and together they have a son, Matthew, Reverend Canon Reed Simon. Our next presenter is Miss Lorraine Gumbs. Miss Gumbs has over 17 years' experience in the field of social work. She was a teacher for 2 years, a senior social worker for 12 years, and had been the Commissioner of Social Development for 5 years. She graduated with honors with a bachelor's degree in social work and sociology and a master's degree in social work. Ms. Gumbs has facilitated numerous workshops and received training in critical areas such as mediation, witness statement taking, psychosocial support, child abuse protocol, and child sexual exploitation. She has also presented various reports locally and regionally on various aspects of social development in Anguilla. She also successfully completed the Structured Assessment of Violent Risk in Youth program, which is the most commonly used and widely researched instrument for violence and risk assessment in adolescents. Ms. Gumbs is also involved in church and community groups and is a proud mother of a daughter, Rihanna. Lorraine Gumbs. Up next is Mr. Karoni Vanterpool. Mr. Karoni Vanterpool is an 18-year-old student in his second year of sixth form, and he's driven by a commitment to personal growth and excellence. With a passion for football, reading, and debating, he embraces a well-rounded approach to his education and personal interest. As a youth parliamentarian, Karoni is actively engaged in civic matters, using his voice to represent and advocate for his peers. His aspirations center on becoming the best version of himself, both academically and personally, as he builds the foundation for a future of meaningful impact and leadership. Karoni is the premier of our youth parliament, Karoni Vanterpool. Up next is Detective Superintendent William Will Chatterton. Detective Chatterton was a police officer for 30 years in the UK, and he retired in June 2023. He worked in crime investigation for almost all of his police service. Detective Chatterton spent 15 years in counter-terrorism policing as the head of investigations. During that time, he has led many prominent investigations, including the suicide bombing in Manchester in 2017, in which 22 people were killed and many hundreds injured. Will, as he loves to be called, is now Detective Superintendent at the Royal Anguilla Police Force. He's on a 12-month contract, and his title is Director of Change. Detective Superintendent Will Chatterton. And to round off our panel, we have Miss Yannick Stewart. Miss Stewart is a lawyer who has been practicing in Anguilla since 2011. She obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, in 2006, a Bachelor of Laws degree with honors from the University of the West Indies, Barbados campus in 2008, and her Council of Legal Education certificate in 2010. Ms. Stewart works at the firm of Fontaine and Associates and has represented clients at all levels of the court, magistrates, high court, court of appeal, in both civil and civil matters. Ms. Stewart is a member of the Council of the Anguilla Bar Association. She was a member 2014 to 2017, took a break, and she has been a member since 2021. She is also a member and secretary of the Disciplinary Tribunal. Outside the practice of law, Ms. Stewart volunteers her services as teacher at the Albina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School for Cape Law, and also tutor at the Comprehensive Learning Center in North Hill for Cape Law. She volunteers as a private tutor and a mentor to many youths. She's general secretary of the Roaring Lion Football Club. I'm not sure how well they are, a position which she has held since 2014, and one that sees her working all the time with children of all ages at the Football Academy. Ladies and gentlemen, Yannick Stewart. And to moderate this discussion is perhaps one person who needs no introduction, our very own Mr. Keith Stone Graves, Program Manager at Radio Anguilla. Let us give a warm round of applause to our panelists and welcome to our moderator, Mr. Keith Stone Graves.
Thank you very much. Very good evening to one and all. No, that sounds so cool. You know, tonight is going to be a great night. Lots to explore. It's a great topic, crime and violence, causes, threats, and solutions. Firstly, let me compliment the Anguilla Bar Association for putting together this activity. I think it's timely and it's something that we really need to. Tonight, I want you to be absolutely frank and open. It's going to be interactive. Once we've gotten the 3-minute presentations from each of the panelists, the floor will be open, and we want you to pose as many questions as you would like. Make any suggestions, because as the topic says, we are exploring causes, threats, and the big one, most importantly, solutions. That's so important. All right, I've said enough. Let's go down the line and call firstly on Reverend Canon Reed Simon, parish priest, to give us his opening 3 minutes. Rev Simon.
Testing. Working. Good evening to one and all, and it's a pleasure to be here. Let me thanks to the Bar Association for inviting me to share in this discussion. I am sure that there's a lot to be said from all of us, but I just want to start out by saying that I believe crime is a clear and present danger to social stability in every society, but in a society like ours where our greatest resource is our human resource, crime poses a real and present danger to us. Of course, we realize there are various forms of crime, and I think one of the things we have not really addressed is what has caused this escalation in crime. Aside from my notes, I listened to Miss or Mrs. Barrett? Miss Barrett, okay, I'll prophesy. I listened to Miss Barrett, who, you know, she talked about when she came here, how it is that we could leave our doors open, leave our cars unparked. And I certainly remember days when I would come here many years ago. A friend of mine would actually leave his car on the airport, and I would go meet the key in the ignition, and I go take it up and I start the car and go about my business. I am not so sure this is all possible now. It may happen that people do it, but by and large, you get the impression that it's not happening. What it means is that something has changed. What has caused this shift in the understanding of us as a society? I want to posit and say that we have grown selfish. on all fronts, religious, political, social, and otherwise. We've grown very selfish. And when we think of self, it means that we exclude everyone else. In the midst of it all, we have not paid any attention to social cohesion, working together, something that governed us early in our growth as a society. And the three pillars of society which we know sustained us for quite a while, which was home, meaning the family, the church, and the school. And there's a breakdown in all three at this point in time. There are variations of these three pillars, and I believe this has contributed to crime. I don't want to get into all the solutions. Now, at least I don't think that I have all the solutions. And so I am using my 3 minutes to say that we have to now discuss crime, not just in this moment, but as an ongoing exercise until we get it to a point where it's manageable, or in a real way we can't ever get rid of crime, because it'll be interesting to find out the various levels of crime. And just maybe if we listen to Bob Marley, and I like to recognize some of these guys as prophets. He said there's a natural mystic blowing through the air. And do we have that mystic blowing through every facet of our society? What do we say within our churches? Is there a sense of honesty? Is there a sense of respect and tolerance? Let's move from the church. In our places of business, are our business people honest in their dealings? Because the smallest little effort to undermine or to share in corruption is construed as crime. It may not be crime that is prosecuted, but it's crime. And so the natural mystic within our political realm are our leaders in their honesty, speaking the truth, all of this. And so I sometimes wonder, the mystic blowing through the air, how does it affect all the sectors of society? How does it affect all the pillars and every institution? Let me stop there, and then we will engage a bit later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Canon Simon. And I was hoping you would add, there's a natural mystic blowing in the air. And if you continue, if you listen carefully, you will hear.
Yeah, we're probably not listening.
All right. Miss Lauren Gums, Commissioner, Social Development, please, your 3 minutes.
So I don't even think I need 3 minutes because a lot of what I was going to say was already said by Maureen and Hannah. Okay. So as I said, a lot of what I was going to say. So I don't want to be repetitive in what I think tonight is more of a discussion than a speech. So as the canon kind of pointed out before, like crime is an inevitable part of society, unfortunately. And I think what we have to calculate now is what is the cost? What is it costing us? And I don't know if we could ever measure what trauma is, what we can measure, what suffering is, and if we can even measure the societal effects, if we could even calculate it, because it's so widespread. Because it's just not victim, it's victims. When one thing occurs, hundreds of people are affected, and Anguilla is small. So if hundreds of people are affected, I think we're also missing one other person here, and that's the matter from the health. Because I think this is a serious mental health issue that we're now facing because of all the trauma that it has occurred, because of all the crime and violence. So I'll stay there, and we can discuss it further.
Yes, warming up nicely. I'm loving what I'm hearing. Thank you very much, Ms. Gums. Let's move now to Kirani Vanterpool, Premier, Anguilla Youth Parliament. And let me say, I'm so absolutely delighted that you're on this panel tonight.
Thank you, thank you. And of course, I prepared a speech. I'm still getting accustomed to the public speaking, so until then, I'll have my speeches. Yes. So, distinguished guests, both present and virtual, a present good evening. The issues of both crime and violence remain pressing concerns in Anguilla, and it's clear that the heart of the problem lies within our youth, especially young men. As a student, I see firsthand the lack of drive and ambition amongst my peers. Many are without purpose and direction, and it's a troubling path that often leads to only three destinations: jail, the grave, or lifelong suffering. The values and principles that once guided previous generations are fading quickly. As the saying goes, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Many young people today are caught in an identity crisis. They are disconnected from what they could be, what they should be, or what they would be if only they embraced a life of ambition and integrity. The ability to understand that today's choices shape tomorrow's reality should be a defining trait for any individual seeking respect and success. But as we sit here this evening, choices are being made that bring harm not only to individuals, but to our entire community. The pressing question is why? Is it a lack of proper parenting, difficult circumstances, the absence of faith? During this discussion, we will explore these causes, address the threats, and identify potential solutions to turn the tide of our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, young man. As I said, I'm so proud that you're on the panel this evening. Let's move now to Will Chatterton, Director of Change, and that's going to come in for some talk here this evening from the Royal Anguilla Police Force. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll look forward to it. I'd just like to echo my colleagues this evening by saying a big thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight and to offer my views on what is obviously a very challenging situation. I'd like, if I may, to start with a quote that I've used many times in the UK, and it's by Bishop Desmond Tutu. And he says, there comes a point where we have to just stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out where they're falling in. Just like in many other countries throughout the world, we're seeing members of our communities fall into that river. Some sadly don't survive. Others leave behind trauma and the threat of repercussions. And I think that frames nicely for me the discussions this evening. So, as Ms. Barrett outlined before, my background is predominantly investigating terrorism in the UK. And I mention that again because there are, I think, distinct parallels between investigating and the causes of terrorism and what we're facing here in Anguilla today. And some of those similarities are as follows: that those attracted to often the criminal narrative are often vulnerable. They're looking for companionship in gangs, they're looking for status, and perhaps following an ideology, which they don't get necessarily in the home environment. In many cases, in my experience, families were unaware of the extremism that their children were walking into. And and when they became aware, it was often too late and didn't know where to turn for help. And the profile was young adults, sadly the same profile that we've heard discussed and outlined this evening. So the threats, to keep brief, I've identified as three areas. So the first one is demographics. Okay, so again in the introduction it was said that there was an age profile, and that profile, if you Google it, is Generation Z, known as Zoomers. That was news to me, but it's there on Google. And they are people born between 1997 and 2012, so the current ages of 12 to 27. And the profile of those people they're influenced very much to a large extent by social media. The internet continues to make it simple for individuals and groups to promote and consume radicalizing content. The more independent from close-knit families and the community that we would have seen perhaps as recently as 10 years ago. And the more likely to challenge norms and authority, questioning traditional authority structures, hierarchical models, for example, within the education system and the police. So I would ask the question, are we able to identify those at most risk within those ages of being drawn into a life of crime and violence? And if so, do we have the adequate measures to try and steer them away from going down that path of criminality? The other threat I see is technology. The advancements of technology, or the weaponization of technology as I see it. And what I'm talking about there is, again, mobile telephones, and similar media. Okay, technology is a critical enabler, with criminals exploiting technology to hide their networks, spread propaganda, and accelerate criminality. The increase in application of end-to-end encryption within devices is presenting a significant challenge to law enforcement. And I think the final threat is the ability to cross borders. Criminals move across borders with relative ease, across countries, often unchallenged, and that brings, again, significant challenges to law enforcement. Solutions, very, very complex, but again, you know, coming from a counter-terrorism background, what they call the contest strategy in the UK centres on what we call the 4 Ps, and it's worked very well for a large number of years now. So the 4 Ps are as follows: protect, prepare, prevent, and pursue. And very briefly, protect. So this would include protecting our infrastructure, protecting us, for example, with better quality CCTV coverage, improved lightings at areas that may be exploited, something as simple as perhaps removing overgrowth, bushes from areas that, again, are vulnerable, where people can sort of hide with ease, and enhancing perhaps more security at our borders. So that's protect. Prepare is asking the question where we need to horizon scan and get ahead of criminal methodology. Do we have, for example, the right legislation in place to tackle these ever-challenging risks? Do we have appropriate resources and expertise within law enforcement or the judicial system? Are we able to exploit technology being used by criminals? And do we employ methods to collectively capture learning amongst the different agencies, including the ones sat here today, to make sure we're testing and exercising in preparation for the criminality that is to follow? Prevent would be to identify those at risk of radicalisation or criminality and to safeguard and divert them away, disrupting those that seek to radicalise the vulnerable. The objectives of Prevent are to tackle ideological causes, intervening early to support people, enabling people who have already engaged to disengage and rehabilitate. And that includes and necessitates a whole system approach, which again has been touched upon by colleagues already here this morning, that every touch point within our society has a responsibility. That's education, welfare, doctors, the police, the whole gambit, to try and steer people away from criminality. And finally, pursue. Pursue is, like, if you like, the blunt end. That's the arrest of individuals. Have we got in place the right range of capabilities to investigate, detect and disrupt violent activity? Do we work effectively with existing legislation to disrupt criminal activity before it becomes unmanageable? Do we need to amend, where necessary, legislation and practices to ensure we're equipped to deal with the increasing sophistication of what is organised criminality? And I would question, do we work collaboratively alongside the criminal justice system and other vital parts of our different agencies to try and combat the ever-increasing risk of criminality that we've talked about this evening? I'm sorry if I've gone over my 3 minutes slightly there, but thank you.
Thank you very much. And because I know you will be under the line of fire, in the line of fire this evening, I was grateful to you, was gracious in giving you some extra time. All right? All right, let's hear from my very good friend, Sister Yannick Stewart, from the Law Chambers of Fontaine and Associates. Yannick.
Hello, good night, one and all. Thank you so much for being here tonight. The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. This is a line from Shakespeare's play, Henry VI. And this line is often interpreted as a commentary on the role of lawyers in society, suggesting that eliminating lawyers would lead to chaos or a breakdown of law and order. Now, in the introduction, Ms. Barrett indicated that there might be a sentiment in certain parts of society that lawyers are a part of the problem because the police will catch them, arrest, detain, try to prosecute, and then the lawyers will get them off. But we are actually here because If you remove the lawyers, then you will have a disruption of established law and order. In my view, lawyers are a part of the last bastion of the rule of law and ultimately our democracy. We are here to ensure that our society remains one that is governed by rules and order. I am here as an attorney, unfortunately, oftentimes I'm not practicing at the criminal bar. I have to deal with persons who come into conflict with the law. So I am on the back end. So we speak about all the causes. What happened, this causes crime. What happened when the criminal act has occurred? That's where I come into play. And you remove the lawyers, and I don't know that that is a part of the solution. So hopefully tonight I am able to help to demystify the myth surrounding lawyers and what it is that we do, and to have persons recognize the important role that lawyers play in this whole system of justice. And every person here on the panel ultimately plays a role in that. We are members of this society, and the solutions have to come from us. But there has to be a recognition that we all play a role, and rule of law is paramount to our democracy. Now, before I end, just to say the Roaring Lions Football Club is one of the best. This is the top team here at all levels. Yes. Just to put that out there, the Roaring Lions FC, we have a game on Sunday. Thank you.
If she did not come back on that, I could have written that script. I know she was going to come back at the end. I want to thank all the panelists for the introductory remarks. You would have heard and gotten a sense of where we're going this evening. As I said, we want it to be very open, very frank. Ask as many questions as you can, and hopefully the panelists will be able to answer. So let's get straight into business. In 2024, several gun-related incidents in Anguilla, including murders, shootings, and increased gun violence. July 10th, 2024, 27-year-old man shot and killed on Long Bay Road. July 14th, 2024, young man shot and killed in Blowing Point, and another person was wounded. We go to June 21st, 2024, person injured in a shooting near the Lansing Bowl Cultural Center. June 30th, 2024, 4 people injured in a shooting incident on Back Street. This is just a hard reality. I didn't make this up. This is the information that's put out by the Royal Anguilla Police Force. So, here we are this evening, looking at crime, violence, causes, threats, and solutions. We want to hear from you, because the folks here are not going to be doing all the talking. I don't intend, all they've asked me to do is moderate, so I'm just steering the ship. That's all right? And providing some provocative questions from time to time. So, anyone wishes to start the ball rolling? Let's start with the causes of the crime and violence in Anguilla. And may I say, the rest of the Caribbean. Indeed, it's not, Anguilla is not the only Caribbean island that's been impacted negatively by crime and violence. The cause or causes. Anybody? Please. Do we have another? Yeah. A roving mic, yes. So please feel free, as I said, to be sharp, to let it out. Let's talk about it. And as I said, at the end, when we leave here, we should have a bunch of solutions to provide to the authorities, to the police, and so on and so forth, right?
Well,
Please, go ahead.
hopefully we get solutions. Eustella Fontaine, member of the Bar Association, vice president of the Anguilla Bar Association. I'm originally from Dominique, and I've lived in Anguilla for 21 years. And as Ms. Barrett has said, when I first came to Anguilla, it was very idyllic in terms of persons, as Reverend Simon said, used to leave the keys in the ignition, even leave their vehicles on. And I moved to Anguilla from the UK. So at first I was very petrified, like, why are you leaving the keys in your vehicle, engine on, going to your office whole day, even forgetting it on? And so that was very nice for me coming back to the Caribbean to have that whole society. And what always struck me every time I passed by, all the children would say, good morning, hello, and everybody would say good morning and hello. And I think in terms of as the years go on, while you would still find the children saying good morning and hello, everybody goes about their business. And it's almost become a continuous hustle that people are more or less hustling day to day, almost to make ends meet, that they forget about family, forget about self, forget about friends. Everybody stay in their own corner of society and do what they need to do to survive. And I think you see that all over the Caribbean as well, in terms of before, we didn't used to go to banks for loans. We had jollification. We had these things where, people would cook food, have drinks. Mm-hmm. So you would feel that every time you could go along and build your house, but now you have to go to work, work 2 jobs, because you take a loan from the bank. And the bank doesn't give you a reprieve, They want their money at the end of the month. So you have to make sure that you have that payment. So the Caribbean has changed in that way, and so has Anguilla, where people are working 2, 3 jobs to make ends meet. So you find things are suffering. Is it a way that we raise in terms of how people can make ends meet on 1 job so they have more time to spend at home with their children, know what they're doing, know how they can give back to their children in society? So sometimes these are the things we need to look at, how things have changed. I always tell people, one of my best experiences about Anguilla was after Hurricane Irma. It might sound wrong, but we went back to the society where everybody was looking out for each other. They were helping each other. Even I was stopping on the road and pick up people and say, you need a ride. Now I'm driving to work, I'm like, I don't know what this person is going to do. Single female in a vehicle. I'm not gonna pick up a male passenger so, but it was so much that we went back to a different way of living. Everyone was looking out for each other. Maybe I'm taking too long on the mic.
Yes.
You might have to stop me, so
Okay.
I'll give to somebody else.
All right, so Sister Lorraine, that's right up your street. Right up your street. No, that's right in your area.
So
Yes.
I totally agree with Ms. Fontaine. I think you said your name was right. But for me, and this might not be popular, it even starts before that. I think society is it has a value deficit, and we have to start there. So it has to start with individuals. So even before the creation of children, we have to start talking about who we are as people before we create children. We are glamorizing a culture of being in situationships and not real relationships, whether that's romantic relationships, whatever you want to call it, because I'm confused with the relationships we have now. But children are being created in them. So if you are creating children in something that is in a relationship that is not made out of love, we have already started our children off at a disadvantage. They're going to be created where a mother and father don't even really know each other. I've had clients where people can't tell me the name of the person. They know them by their nickname, and they don't even know their last name. So that tells me you do not know the person you have created a child with. So that child now comes into this world, most likely in chaos. And when you have chaos and you're growing children in chaos, that means that child is already at a disadvantage. So father might not be present. Mother and father don't have an amicable relationship. Now mother has to go and have 1 or 2 jobs. Father might have to have 2, 3 jobs as well. So everybody's working hard, and then it continues to be a cycle because it's not 1 child we're creating in a situation, 2 children, 3 children. So it compounds the situation, and it becomes out of control. So if we have to force, even before we create children, have to ask ourselves, what are our values in creating these children? And when we create these children, what is the moral compass we want them to have? We have too many children that are unmonitored. Social media access, no monitors, absolutely. Malinka told you she just did a visit where a child was telling her how to make a shank. What does a grade 5 child need to know about making a shank. Some of us probably don't even know what a shank is. But I'm just trying to tell you that that child has open access to their phones, social media, and they are not being monitored. Our children know too much without us leading the discussion of what they should and shouldn't know and influencing that. So now we're creating children that are influenced by peers, influenced by social media, not enough influenced by parents. And as Ms. Fontaine was saying, we have to create a livable wage so more people can be in the home with these children. And we also have to parent. We cannot be afraid of parenting. I have parents that would tell me they can't take their children. Who bought the phones? How can you not monitor something that you have bought? And so I think all of those things are things that we have to first work on. So those are some of the causes. I'll let some others talk about the other causes. But
Yes.
that is definitely...
Let's take in Yannick, please. Thanks, Orion.
Oh, and this is something just from a, I suppose, more practical viewpoint. The statistics that you gave earlier related to gun crime, and practicing at the criminal bar, one of the excuses that we hear oftentimes are not from young men, because it's usually young men. I am yet to see a young woman being charged with a firearm offense. But one of the reasons, if you may, that is given, for example, if a young man is charged or is before the court for possession of firearm, he's saying, listen, I had to get this firearm for my protection. I am being targeted. I am being bullied by this person. I am being threatened by this person, and I don't feel safe. I have made several reports to the Royal Anguilla Police Force. Nothing has happened. This continues. This person has threatened to shoot me. So it's almost as if I need to get myself armed because I feel unsafe and I have to go to work. I have to protect my family. I have to protect myself. So wherever I go, I'm going to walk with this weapon. And that is why I have it. There are young men who are saying, listen, I have to protect my mother from this abusive partner. And that's why I needed to get this weapon, because he threatened to come back and harm us. So from a very practical standpoint, this is how young men feel in society. They feel targeted. They feel that they're being threatened. And it's as if they have no recourse as it relates to law enforcement doing anything about it. And they feel that they have to take matters into their own hands. So it's almost as if this person is threatening you, they have a firearm, you have a firearm. When we meet up, it's a showdown like the OK Corral, Wild Wild West. And that is what is happening as it relates to these gun crimes, because my view is that once you have a firearm, you are going to feel the need to use it. And the slightest provocation, the first thing you're going to do is to reach for a weapon. But these are some of the explanations that have been presented before the court for persons, being in possession or feeling the need to arm themselves. And whether it be a firearm or a cutlass or a knife, whatever weapon it is, they feel unsafe and they believe that this is the best way to protect myself.
And before I bring in Cannon and Mr. Chatterton, I did an interview this week with Merlene Barrett, president of the Anguilla Bar Association. And she startled me by some information. This is real stuff. Ms. Barrett told me in the interview on Radio Anguilla that members of the Bar Association visited all the 6 primary schools in Anguilla. And one of the things coming through from the students in which they interacted was that they were told by their parents, if you hit me, if someone hits you, hit them back. And I was just blown away. Because this is what she was saying that they gathered in this exercise. So it leads me back, panelists, to just where we're at in Anguilla and the question, why? Cannon, could you help us?
Well, I don't know about helping us, other than to say I'm joining the discussion. A number of interesting points were raised, but I want to go back to the issue of identity. Who am I? a lot of persons don't have a sense of who they are. The reality is that we have been created for a purpose. And here I may be speaking from a theological perspective in the understanding that we believe as a church, as a community of faith, that God has made us for himself. But God has not just made us for himself, God has made us to live in community. And so my worth and my value is not just what it means to me, but how do I relate to persons within a community? The Africans have a wonderful word called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu simply means, I am because you are, or you are because I am. So there's no separation of me from you. And in the midst of it, we are not able to ascertain our value and our worth. So it's very easy, and a colleague of mine, I heard him make the statement, or he gave a case the other day, happening locally, that a youngster went home to his parents, to his mom, and he said, Mommy, you love me? And he's like, yes. She said, yes, I love you. And he said, Mommy, you sure you love me? I say, yes, I love you. Mommy, you really don't love me? No. Mommy said, yes, I love you. But what happens is that the youngster was exposed to the gang culture, and gang culture is not all that bad. We could talk about that a bit later, but it's not all that bad. Children gravitate to gangs because they are rejected somewhere. Somebody rejects them. So they want a place where they are loved and appreciated. So this youngster was being groomed, nurtured, encouraged to associate with a number of persons, and mainly young men, because we're looking for members. We're looking to build our demographic capital. We're looking for persons to be in our cause. At the end of the day, we have not really gotten the message across in terms of value and worth. Who are you? You don't need the stamp of approval for someone to say that you are valued and worth. And Psalm 139 comes to mind that says to us, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. God has made us. Inderi, when she sang her song, she said, God has put everything on me, every freckle, every hair, every whatever, as God wants it to be. No, that message is not out there. Who gets that message out there? The church, sometimes we think it has a captive audience, but more and more we realize it is not having the kind of audience that it needs. So where does it come from? And this is where I believe that this cohesion between all sectors of society and moments like these, and not just talking, but offering the solutions and planning as to when do we come together again so that we could continue to talk about these things, continue to encourage, continue to support, continue to build each other. Because we have to do that. You can't sit in your corner and figure it is okay. All of us must work together because we don't have the target audience that we'd like. The school, we have the children for what, 5-6 hours? How much can we get into that? And then, of course, that is in the context of teachers having their own challenges, whether administrative or interpersonal or otherwise. And so they are not necessarily concerned about all the sidebar issues. In the midst of it, we as church, we're looking for numbers. We play a numbers game and we want everybody to come to our assembly, to our place and whatever, and we'll say the grandiose of things to draw people. The family, I think somebody raised it, Fontaine, the lady from England, transplanted, Anguillian, right. Dominican. Yes. Raised a point about how it is that people are trying to make money. Everybody's trying to make money. Now, at the end of the day, if we talk about having what is a livable wage, because someone mentioned that a livable wage, when will a livable wage be enough? Because Bob Marley says the more they get it, the more they want it. Money is a numbers game. And at the end of the day, the more you have is the more you want. And so we have to be factual that there are a number of persons who take on loans, go to the bank and lending institutions to get money that they don't need, that they want, and at the expense of their children and the family. They have to do it because in the eyes of our brother Stanford, I have to look good. I have to drive the latest car. I have to live in a nice house. I have to wear fancy clothes, because if I don't do that, then Stanford will look at me as being less than. So where is my worth and value? Is it on the material things that is in all these things, or is it in me having worth and value? And I'm going to play my part, not only responsibly to God, but to the society in which I live. I know others have to, so I'm going to pause there.
And you've made so many wonderful points there, Canon. And just to add to what Lorraine said, and I think this is absolutely critical, the family. It all starts with and in the family. And she's absolutely spot on this. Let's hear from Mr. Vanterpool, youngest member of our panel, the Premier of the Anguilla Youth Parliament. It'd be good to hear his views.
Yes, so I mainly see the product of children not taking things seriously from the beginning in school. And it is seen as cool to be a part of a gang in school. And the gangs in school may not be as serious as the gangs in society, but they start there, they form their own names, they have nicknames for each other, and they think it's cool. And now, right now, we have fights almost every 2 days. Every week we have fights. And yeah, and I'll be in class and it'll just be disruption, it'll be loud. And when you go outside and you ask the children, why are they not in class? The answer is, we don't have a teacher. Most times the answer is, we do not have a teacher. So the question is, what is going on?
Yeah, what do we do in a situation like this?
Yeah.
No teachers, students are left on their own, you know.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Let me just add some stats here. Before you get through them, Mr. Stanford, let me just add some stats here that I got from the Royal Anguilla Police Force. 1st April 2023 to 31st March 2024. 42 incidents involving guns, 5 resulting in murder, compared to 30 incidents and 2 murders in 2022-2023. We'll take you, Mr. Richardson, and then we'll bring in Mr. Chatterton. Yeah. He has a big voice, man.
Just a reaction, because I taught as well. But we can't allow people to think that all the fights in the school happen outside of the classroom or in the absence of a teacher, right? There are fights that happen right in front of teachers, inside classrooms, yeah? So when we're trying to gather the cause of these things, is deep. And I believe if we knew what were the cause in it, we might be able to come up with some more solutions. That's why we are all over the place. Not only in Anguilla, in the region and the world. If we actually knew, apart from the fact, like the church, so I might say, okay, it's a spiritual problem. If we put a tag on it, then we know where to go. But if we find out later on it's not a spiritual problem, then we would have wasted our time. So we have to keep thinking solutions, and not trying to apply one solution across the board. Yeah. And this, I think, part of the problem even with laws and rules in school. I remember being at Stoneground School as a teacher in the 80s. And the class was kind of disruptive. And I used to plug my hair. I didn't have hair. Trying to come up with a solution. You know? And you know what I did? I prayed a lot about it too. And it came up, this was my solution. These students feel that the rules are mine. And therefore the rules are mine. I'm the one who's supposed to obey them. So I sat them down one morning from beginning of the day until break. And say, okay, we're going to come up with our own class rules. I said we. Come up with our own class rules. And they liked the idea. So we say, this is what we're going to do. What are some of the things that you done that you shouldn't be doing? And they could rattle them off. I say, okay, for each of these now, let's come up with a possible solution, a reaction, a disciplinary method to it. Boy, you should hear the solution that some of them had. I'll give you one example. If somebody speaks in class out of turn, or they shout, put them to stand up outside in the sun in a chair with a stone hold up over my head. Only after I went through the exercise, then they began to realize that what we were doing was a kiss compared to what they think should be done. Plus, whenever there was a disruption, I would say, is this acceptable? And the school would say, no, no. The class would say, no. So which rule is this? That's rule number 9. What rule number 9 say? Da, 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 da. So what should happen? And they would apply it. So they became a part of the solution. Now I can't say we can do that for society. But the point is we have to start small, and all of them are part of the decision making, so it helped. Second point for me now, forget about that. I was doing some research there looking at the different causes of violence. And some of them are mentioned by the panelists, like influence of peers, low self-worth, victims, people who have been victims of abuse and neglect, access to weapons. I don't know how much access we have, but a lot of people got. Witness to violence in a home, community, etc. And lack of attention or respect. There's a lack of attention or respect. These are some of the causes of violence. Now for me, I like the one-on-one approach. You deal with each person at his or her level. That was always worked for me. Dealing with groups is always problematic because, again, there's one rule for this, that's the way it has to be applied. It happens in a home. The child will say, you treat her different from me. And you try to explain to them, well, so they're not understanding that. Brother, sister, same rule. If I do it and she did it, same thing. And that's what I expected in society as well. One last point for me. Children and crime are not synonymous terms. There are some big people committing a lot of crime too. Just saying, and there's some what we call white-collar crime as well. And they also know that people are doing things and they're getting away with them. Yeah? For reasons, well, somebody mentioned sometimes the lawyers. Yeah? I don't know. But this is what children see. This is what they see. So you have to try to continue to dispel that. That the lawyer is here to help to maintain law and order, etc., etc. Yeah.
Thank you,
I've
Mr.
spoken
Richardson.
too much.
Let's bring in Mr. Chatterton. You want to share some views here?
Thank you very much. As you said, there's a lot of very valid points been raised there. I think the first point for me is, what has been experienced here in Anguilla today is not clearly unique to Anguilla. It's been referenced across the Caribbean. Trust me, that is across the Western world as well, particularly in the UK. I've seen it emerging for many years now, and sadly we're in a much worse place than you are in Anguilla today. So, we are at a crossroads now where we have to make some serious decisions to try and stop it accelerating at the pace that it is now. That's the first point. I would also agree that, and this is again not unique to Anguilla, we're seeing, the breakdown of families. We used to have more close-knit, wider families within communities that would take care of, look after and guide our youngsters. That's less so now for a whole host of reasons. Marriage perhaps isn't the institution that it was, has been referenced already. People maybe don't want that sort of lifestyle anymore. People having to go out and get second, sometimes third jobs. So who's looking after the children? They're spending increasingly amount of time on their own. I think you'd agree that is the case in some instances. Therefore, idle hands and things, they're getting up to mischief, which is the start of criminality perhaps, that then escalates without an adult or role model or family member correcting on the ways before it starts to escalate. Similarly within the schools resources I'm sure are as tight here as they are in the UK. So perhaps less teachers, less time to spend on more, should we say, challenging individuals with more challenging behaviour. Have teachers got the expertise to deal with more troubled pupils and students? Again, a massive challenge. And that's relevant because I talked before about, people there is a pathway that leads to someone pulling a trigger. This does not happen overnight. It's like, I guess, many cancers. Many cancers don't just happen overnight. They develop in your body for years and years and years. Sometimes there can be intervention and it stops that cancer. Other times, sadly, it develops and there's nothing you can do to turn it around. And the parallel there, I think, is with crime. Often it's years and years and years in the making before someone gets to the point where they feel the need to carry a weapon, and more importantly, are happy, if that's the right word, to use it against another human individual. So some real challenges there. In terms of the police force, so the point has been made that people perhaps don't trust or have the confidence in the police, and I understand that. The police force is made up of members of our community, and yes, not everybody is going to be perfect. I accept that, and again, that's not just the RAPF. That is worldwide in every police forces all over the world, and I guess it's the same in any large organisation. But I will say in defence of the RAPF that that we are trying to become more professional. We are trying to enhance our skills and build that trust and confidence in our communities. And I say trust and confidence because it saddens me that I've looked into the eyes of mothers who've lost family members, young men, as you've described, in the prime being gunned down and lives taken away unnecessarily with no apparent motive or reason. And I have appealed to members of the public, to the family, to help provide us with any information at all, any shred of information that gives us a steer towards solving that investigation. And very often there's just a complete and utter wall of silence. So the police, detectives, I'm afraid, don't have a crystal ball. We rely upon the assistance of communities to tell us, feed an intelligence, to give us a steer of what is going on. The scenario that you outlined before about someone picking up a weapon or having a weapon to defend themselves. Okay, that may be the case in some instances, but we are talking about multiple weapons out on the streets, hidden right now in Anguilla. Someone somewhere knows where they are. The police need the help and a steer to try and clean those up. The availability of weapons is, I am told, very, very easy to acquire. Someone said to me, I could get you a weapon within half an hour. Now that really is worrying. Yeah, so we've got to ask ourselves the question: where are these weapons coming from? How are they getting into the country? I'm not aware of anywhere where you can purchase lawfully a weapon in Anguilla. These are the issues, the very real issues that we're facing here, and we cannot let it escalate the way it is. Otherwise, we will completely and utterly lose control. Sorry.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. Chatterton. Yes, please. Someone in back, yeah? Yes. And keep the questions coming and keep it lively, man. Talk. Now is the time to talk.
Our last speaker was saying that the rise in crime in Anguilla is not unique. Unfortunately, that doesn't give me any comfort. You know, this is where I live. And like two other speakers who said when they came here first, how, you know, easy it was, you left your door open, etc., etc. So that doesn't give me any comfort. Saying that, I am pretty sad for young people today in Anguilla because they live in a technological age, you know, and we know they know a lot of things because somebody mentioned a word and I said I didn't even know, I don't know what that is. Shank. But at the same time, they're losing their youth, their childhood. And so I'm not even sure how lucky, in inverted commas, they are. And I also echo what Lorraine said and Bishop said about identity. Because at the Elliott Center, we do a preteen girls program. And one of the things we do at the beginning is to, actually we use Psalm 139, verse 14. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And then we ask them, I mean, I think Merlin did one of those sessions for us once. Showed them, we're talking about identity, who they are, who God made them to be. And they wanted to be everybody else. Merlin at that particular one showed them 20 children and said, any you look like. And they chose people who they didn't look like. And each year we get this. And that's fundamental. So we're all failing our children because that's their foundation. And then it moves on to them going to find places where they feel they belong and people they feel they have things in common with. And so we need to then look at that. And it can't be just the school, it can't just be the home, it's the pillar. It's the home, it's the school, it's the church, it's the community. And we're all failing them in that. And one of the things, you know, I read a research, I was reading this book, and it was talking about, and this is only one aspect I know, about educating children and young people. And there is a part where we have a plan, at least their parents and their family have a plan for them as to what they should be doing and where they should be and the subjects they need to take. And this woman did this research because she's into youth work, and she was saying one of the things she found that was helpful, that was effective, was that they would, what's the word I want? The thing that the subject, the art, the whatever it is that a child is good at, they would encourage. Because even if the child can't read, if he can draw, and he can do that and he feels good about himself doing that, then that lifts his self-esteem. And then other things can come in. He's ready for other things after that. But we tend to want the 3 R's, even if they're not good at it. And then we leave the things they're good at. So where is the respect in that for that child? Where is that individual educating of or upbringing of that child? You know, I mean, Sanford was saying, what works for me will not work for somebody else. It is hard, and I think that's part of our problem. It's not that simple, because we have to see people, see young people as individuals, and we don't have the time for that, because we have 2 jobs, or we're worrying about something else. And it means then that everybody needs to be working together. Church, society, school, community.
You've said it, my sister. You had a question? Please.
Yes.
Oh, my eyes are very good.
Obviously. Good night, everyone. I have a question for Mr. Chatterton.
Mr. Chatterton.
Good. Because we're here also to look for solutions.
Yeah.
You made a point earlier where you were referring to community. as in community reporting, to assist the police in helping to solve some of the crime. I know that a big issue the community members have would be the ability to actually report information and they remain anonymous. Yeah? So my question is, what steps are being taken by the police force to kind of encourage people so that they feel secure to report?
Okay.
Thank you.
Well,
It's on.
is that working?
Yes.
Okay, right. Thank you. So yes, I absolutely recognise that, and it's been an issue now, I think, for some time. So to answer the question directly, what you will see in it, hopefully within the next month or so, is a campaign to try and encourage our communities to provide information, intelligence to the police. So the first strand would be to try and reassure the public that any information that is submitted to the police will be dealt with professionally, and it will be dealt with and treated anonymously. Okay, so I've improved practices within the RAPF to make sure that that is the case for officers putting in intelligence, because that was also an issue, to be completely honest. But we have seen an increase in intelligence now that we have certain structures in place to give reassurance to our own colleagues. I'd like to extend that to our communities, as I say, and we've got a programme that we're going to be working to, hopefully within the next 4 weeks or so. And the additional strand to that, encouraging people to provide information intelligence, is to promote the hotline, if you like, that exists. So you've seen many people may have seen the confidential hotline that exists, but I think there's a general misunderstanding perhaps about how secure that is. So you can go online and provide intelligence to the Royal Anguilla Police Force in absolute confidence that will not come back to you. The information or intelligence that is submitted via that confidential line goes to a secure server in the US. It's then sanitized and fired back to us to pick up in a sanitized form. So we will never find out who the author of that intelligence is. My job is to try and make sure that our communities understand the different methods of submitting safely and anonymously that intelligence, knowing that there's going to be no blowback to them. And I accept that has been, and probably still is, an issue and a blocker to people coming forward with that information. But you can submit intelligence anonymously, and you can have the confidence that it will be dealt with, as I say, professionally and in an anonymous way. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. Please.
Yeah, I just 2 points or 2 questions I wanted to ask. Normally when we speak about crime, we speak about the breakdown in family structures and so forth. And as a child and student of Caribbean history, I've wondered for a long time whether we may not be romanticizing the past a little too much, whether we think about our history as a sort of utopia, and that if you look closely, we have probably always been violent. But the guns have changed the complexity of that violence. That troubled me a lot when I sat in the family court enough to study it and went into the archives in St. Lucia, and the discussions we are having now. If you go, I don't know if it took place in Anguilla, but in colonial times there was what you call the blue books, where the governor would send a report to London. As late as the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the average person in St. Lucia was not born in wedlock, and it's the same across the Caribbean. The average child would have witnessed domestic violence. We had to pass laws to force children into school because parents preferred for the children to work. When I got married and had my children in marriage, that was not the norm. It was breaking the trend. And most of my friends would have witnessed their fathers beating their mothers. Most of us grew up with mothers alone. And boys always fought in schools. it's just not new. And I wondered whether we may be placing the burden of where we are on a new generation, when in reality, we brought old problems to a new and more fast-paced society. We have had to grow as a region much more rapidly than any other civilization. And development normally upstages society. So what I found and what some of the social workers who understood it was telling me is, if you go to the blue books, you see the main crime were predial crimes. And it was predial larceny because what was valuable to us were crops. When we became service-based societies, most of our valuables were in our homes. So who was breaking into a house in the 1950s when you have nothing there? Now you have your cell phones, your laptops, your televisions, and there are valuables to go in there. So rather than stealing your crops, because most of us don't even have crops, our homes are the source of the attraction for people who would have that propensity. And so I just wondered whether there may be a danger in trying to say to the young people now that you're the source of our problems, and we were all living all hunky-dory 30 or 40 years ago before you came along. Instead of realizing that we may have brought some challenges with us. Access to guns and so forth may be changing the complexity of our societies, but I can't say growing up in the 80s and 90s that there wasn't violence. I can't say that hardship has always been there. It's different now, we're more materialistic now, but I mean, we were never wealthy, and our parents always struggled, but we didn't shoot each other. And so, I'm not sure that it's a cause, but I think we may be romanticizing what the causes of it really are. The second thing, it's in relation to something the detective said. And by the way, before I go there, Reed could correct me if I'm wrong, but Ms. Stewart, way before Shakespeare said anything, I think the Apostle Paul said, "Woe to lawyers." So we've been under fire for a very long time. But recently, the issue of serious violent crime was studied in the Caribbean, and the Needham Point Declaration came out. And what it is finding is that the most violent crimes, like murder, in most of our islands, about 80% of these crimes are never solved. And for those that are solved, the conviction rates in the criminal justice system are even lower. So what that means is if you are the victim of a serious violent crime, or you've had a family member who was murdered, there's anywhere between a 75 to 90% chance that the person who committed that crime against you will never be brought to justice. And the trauma that we spoke of is then brought into the justice system because at some point in time, people are going to say, well, what's the point? If you say to me that vengeance belongs to the justice system, but the justice system cannot produce justice for me, then what then is the point? And that's why it's very important for us we need to understand that a judge in particular, or a magistrate in particular, is not there to secure a conviction. We are there to make sure that the persons you eventually convict are actually those who've committed the crime and that the process is fair. But we cannot be oblivious to the fact that if people can get away with crime, then what is the incentive to not commit it, especially since we are also at a point where it is economically viable to be a criminal. So these are some of the, I don't know if it confuses the discussion even more, but sometimes I do think when we think of the causes, we may romanticize it a little bit. But it's a real challenge, I think, to come up with those causes and come up with the solutions to them.
Very grateful for your intervention. Canon, I see your hand going up.
I listened with intrigue. It was Jesus who said, "Woe to you, lawyers." Jesus who said that. I have a wonderful saying from you two. We glorify the past while the future dries up, which is what you're talking about romanticizing. But in the midst of the discussion, we always had a number of these things. But remember, we started with the pillars were there to hold it all together. The pillars are not there anymore. How do we get back the pillars to hold it together. And if it's not the pillars holding it together, then who? Because we have not yet identified an institution that will take the bull by the horns and bring all of us together to the table to make sure we address this issue. When I went to school, we fought, we pelted stones, but it ended there. We had our little groups and everything, and, you know, we segued into our little groups and all of that, but it ended there. But there was always this pillar around us that sought to guide and to lead us along. And I understand all that was said, but can we recapture those pillars to fulfill their responsibility? And we realize that if we were true, if the pillars are true to their ethos and what they represent, and I'm mindful of family because we've always had broken families in the Caribbean. Edith Clark, and my mother who fathered me, she basically gave a very good outline of the brokenness of Caribbean family. And is it really broken? That is the thing. Is it really broken? We had a very good family pattern. The Europeans said to us that the nuclear family is always this: mother, father, children, wedlock, as you mentioned, and this was the ideal. But in spite of us not having those, we functioned, we lived, we didn't wrestle with all of this. And it has gone to another level. And discussions like these challenge us to think about how do we recapture those days. It's not that we're going back to the past, but in light of all that is taking place. And so I jokingly said to some persons the other day, the church is trying, the homes are trying, the school is trying. One of the potent institutions in our societies is the political system. Notice how many persons follow politicians. They will kill for politicians. But you know the interesting thing is? The politicians, to capture a vote, will beat the streets, house to house, to say to persons, listen here, I need your vote. But when violent crime plagues us, when there's a shooting, how many politicians, and I'm going to be bold and say it, I have to apply for my work permit next month, but I still have to say it. How many politicians within our island really go back and beat the streets and talk to people and say to them, hey, we have to stop this. I'm coming to your house. You talked about one-on-one, and I believe in one-on-one. But how many of them are beating the streets and walking with their fans and their supporters, and I venture to say in some instances, their sycophants, who are really saying to them, we got to address this thing. I remember listening to one politician locally, and was trying to make the case that, well, this is Anguilla, and we have crime, and Jamaica and Punta Cana, they have crime, and but people still go there. I'm not concerned about over there. Our greatest resource are our people. And it hurts everybody. We're all interconnected. And somebody mentioned the health system. And it's very interesting, because when there is a shooting and the person is at the hospital, for a number of persons who want to go and make a visit to visit their loved one, they can't go and visit. They allow me in because I'm wearing a dog tag. And so they say it's okay, and they take me at my word that I don't have a gun hidden or whatever. I'm the priest. But I've seen it in the hospital, or small hospital, where lots of people, especially when there's a shooting, and a big one, they can't go in to visit their loved ones because the police, and rightfully so, have locked down the hospital. So it affects us all around. And that is why I'm saying the pillars now, we have to come together. We had all those things before, but the pillars were there. And maybe we need new pillars. Whatever they are in the system, we have identified the three that were most potent in the time. Maybe we need more. But certainly, we have to get those involved, whatever they are, because if we don't, the scourge is going to decimate our land. I thought I'd share that.
Thank you, Canon. Anyone else, please? Mr. Banks?
The school and the church were one and the same. We've got the church and run the school.
Church school.
And they were singing the same song. So each was reinforcing what other was doing. Now look like each other they got their own new stuff. So that's kind of what you need.
Thank you very much. Mr. Banks? please. Oh, okay.
Well, I want to pivot from causes, because it's been an hour and a half, and we're still there, to address threats. So I was
Threats,
just
yes.
asking Mr. Banks if he wanted to address causes,
Okay.
then I would go after.
All right, that's fine.
I like to stand to speak. And that's a question for us. I see the police, I see community development, I see the youth parliament, I see the preacher, I see the lawyer. What about the role of sport in all of this? Sport. I want to say that I'm involved in sport to a certain extent. And we have many coaches on the park at afternoons, football, cricket, whatever. One of the things we find is that the coaches are alone, one or two coaches. The parents don't even have the time to have their children picked up. The coach have to go after his practice to take them home off the island because the parents are working. The coaches themselves should be working. I mean, they're not getting paid, but they have made that sacrifice. I know when I was young, there wasn't many jobs around. So when we went to the park in the afternoon to play cricket or football, it was a multi-generational affair. We had people who were 50, 60, down to boys. I know when I played volleyball, I know Yannick is a volleyball player, we had guys from all ages playing, down to little ones, and we would bring the little ones in the team later on, or very early. A lot of the guys who are playing volleyball now actually began by playing with me. I was in my 40s. And they had that, I was like a mentor to them. So, but what a strange thing happened. We got lights, electricity in Anguilla. Yeah, it was bad. And we got lights in the park, volleyball. We got lights in the Correctional Ballpark. And therefore, the older persons played at night, and the younger ones were at home doing the homework. So they didn't get that, first of all, the sports suffered, because the younger ones didn't get the training from the older ones. And then they didn't get, important thing, the mentoring from the older ones. Cricket, as I said, so there was this mentoring which happened all the way through on the football field, the cricket field, volleyball field, softball field. There was this mentoring which happened. It's no longer happening because people are at home, people are at work, 3, 4 jobs. How do we get back to there? Where sport can be a way of, because we do mentoring, but we do one-on-one mentoring. We need a whole cross-section of mentors, persons who mentor people in the natural environment on the sports field, not a forced mentorship, but a natural mentorship. How do we get back to there? And I think sport is a way in which we can do that. But how do we get back to the point where sport can be multi-generational?
Thank you very much. Anyone on the panel wishes to take this one? Yannick, you're a sports lady.
Right. So I am a member of the Roaring Lions Football Club. I'm sorry. I've been on the executive now for a number of years. I started out playing volleyball, and then the guys who I played volleyball with, they're involved in football, and so I've been around for a while. We have an academy. We go from ages 3 to 17. Then we have our U17 program, and then we have a senior program. For the most part, it's a men's football club, but at our academy level, we have boys and girls. And there is some mentorship that happens. But there's this thing that I have observed. If you watch primary school football, right? When there's a primary school football game, you can't find somewhere to park. The park is packed. Their parents, the support, through the roof. These are the same children that are moving to high school. And so you have high school football and you hardly see anyone there. These are now the same children who are going to be playing at the national level, either under 17, under 14, under 15. And again, the support isn't there. These same boys are transitioning to the senior teams. The support isn't there. So there is a lot of mentorship that is needed. It happened, but now what we're finding is that there are a lot more children that require a lot more time and attention. They are with us probably 4 hours for the week, and this is for the senior team. For our academy, we are only there on Saturdays. And so we see the children that stand out, and you can say, I don't necessarily want to label anyone like a problem child, but a child that probably requires a little bit more attention. But undoubtedly, once there is football, you have to stay late as a part of the coaching staff because you're driving all over the island, some Island Harbor, and then we're going to South Hill, and then we're going to West End, and we have to stay there sometimes really late because somebody is not coming to pick up or they're unable to. So that in a single parent household, a mother is out working. There is no support there. I have a problem with dropping off a child, and my question is always, who is home? There's no one there. I have a difficulty in terms of reaching out to a parent and saying, listen, can I take home your child? Are you okay if I take home your child? Because nobody has said anything, nobody's showing up. So there's definitely something that is happening there. I see the role that sports could play, the positive role, especially with young men. Mostly you have a lot more male football teams than you have female football teams. So that definitely is a positive influence. But then again, aside from what the Anguilla Football Association is doing, what is government doing as it relates to sports? There is the sort of framework that you would think that government would create to ensure that sports is enhanced and that you are pumping resources into sport. It is not happening. So that everything that's happening in football is thanks to the Anguilla Football Association. But when we have international games, different things happen and different people show up to the games. And you wonder, where are these people when our coaches are struggling because we don't have balls or we don't have water and Gatorade and ice and we have to dip in our own pockets? So it's not just that you're volunteering your time, but you have to dip in your own pocket if a child is there and they need something. And I believe that that is a part of the problem. The same children who will give the problems in school, they come to football and it's the same thing. And I've heard, I've seen children on the park and I'm like, why are you here? What is happening with school? Oh, I don't have a teacher. And it's from first form all the way up to sixth form. One of our footballers just started sixth form and he has to figure out what is going to happen because I don't have an integrated math teacher, but is a part of what is required for CAPE. Why is he having to figure out where he's going to find a teacher to teach him integrated math when the school has said, this is a program that we are offering, and he has decided that this is something that I want to do? Why is it that this isn't something that's being addressed by education or by the government of Anguilla? So we can only do so much as coaches and as persons who volunteer in sport, but there is a lot more in terms of the gap, because we only see them and they have that positive influence, and persons who I like to say speak light and life into them. Just to segue a little bit to what Justice Maurice said, these same persons who grew up in the 80s and the 70s, it is a fact that for most of us, our first experience with violence is within the home. And I'm from Jamaica, and I've often heard, let us not spare the rod and spoil the child. And that oftentimes are not meant brutalization. And everybody did it, and it was okay. Who are the parents now? These are the same people who are now parenting these children. When you are coming from a background of violence, that is what you know. This is how you discipline your children. You brutalize them, and it is okay because this is what we do. If you're not going to hear, then listen, it is going to be the rod. So then how are we expecting that this is not going to have that sort of adverse impact on our children? Because we know violence. There is no soft life. There is no parenting. There is no affection. There is no love from parent to child. The love is, I'm providing a roof over your head and I'm providing food for you. How can you not know that I love you because I'm doing these kinds of things? These are the children from the 70s and 80s who are now the parents.
Yes, some serious points there. Yannick, thanks for your intervention. And of course, we continue. I see we are under the 30-minute timeline to the end. So, legal counsel, Kati, you mentioned something that
Yes.
threats.
So
You
I-
wanted the threats to be
yes,
addressed.
I wanted to address one issue that I think is a major threat, and that exacerbates the problem. I know that, well, first of all, notwithstanding that everybody wants to kill the lawyers, I think that people need to understand that it's not everybody that the police charge are guilty. And we have a saying, it's better to have a guilty man on the streets than an innocent man in prison. The rule of law is there for a reason. There is a standard of proof that has to be met. It has to be met by the prosecution, which includes the police. Now, because crime is such an issue, I know that we brought in persons like the Director of Change and others that look very much like him. And we had an issue before where Anguillians don't really trust the police. I don't know if it's better now because the reports that I have heard from clients, Director of Change, have not been positive. They have indicated that the task force from the UK have been disrespectful, they have been hostile. Even lawyers have issues with the task force. But what concerns me, I was in court some time ago, and the acting magistrate, who again looks very much like the Director of Change, had a private caucus meeting with police officers and prosecutors. No defense counsel. Now, we have talks in chambers with our judge, with magistrates all the time, but it's balanced. So there is defense, there is prosecution. There is an issue, it's on the table, we resolve as much as we can, but the rule of law is never compromised. The magistrate, the judge, does not know about the facts of the matter, is not explained about the matter, because that is done through a trial. Recently, because we are so anxious to charge people and say we are doing something, what happens is that when you have prosecution allegedly colluding with the judiciary, it then means that there is no separation of powers. Each of us have our separate roles to play. The prosecution has to bring its case, bring its evidence, prove its case. The lawyers defend their clients. It is for the judiciary, who is supposed to be independent, to look at the evidence, not to have inside meetings to say, we're going to explain to the magistrate what happened before. And then the magistrate comes out and gives the most harsh bail conditions that have ever been given in any bail matter in magistrate's court. And nobody's going to tell me that that's a coincidence. And that, I think, is a threat, because all of us want crime to be reduced. All of us want to find the culprits. But we have to do it in a way that preserves the rule of law. Because if we don't, if there is ever collusion and a breakdown of the independence of the judiciary, then there is no democracy and it is chaos. And then we end up getting innocent people over there. You understand what I'm saying? So, and I know I've put the Director of Change in the hot seat, perhaps.
But I told him so earlier.
And also I would ask Ms. Stewart to weigh in because she practices more at the criminal law, at the criminal bar than I do. But I think it's important for persons to understand the role of lawyers, the role of the judiciary, and the role of the police. There are three separate roles that ought to stay separate in order to preserve the rule of law.
Thank you very much. Very good intervention. Mr. Chatterton, you wish to weigh in, and also lawyer Yannick Stewart.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, I've said before, I recognise the fact that, you know, perhaps there isn't the trust and confidence from the public in the police that would like to see. But the fact that I'm sat here now, I think, is evidence that we are trying to make strides forward to build that trust and confidence. That will remain to be seen, and it won't happen overnight, but it's what we're striving for. As I say, they're hoping to achieve that. In terms of the task force, I'm disappointed to hear that. Well, I won't go into specifics here, but obviously there are channels which you can go down to make those complaints heard, and I'm welcome to hear those afterwards or at any point in the future. You know, I'm not an advocate of people being rude or not civil to people. There is no place for that within the RAPF or visiting police officers. That they make that very clear, because that's completely contrary to building trust and confidence that I've just said we're hoping to increase. So that's that point. I will pick up on the point of rushing to charge people. Now, yes, of course, we will look to charge people, but there is clearly a threshold to meet, an evidential threshold to meet before you can charge somebody, okay, as you very much well know. So I might wish to charge somebody, but unless the evidence is there as a prima facie case, that person is not getting charged. Then we've got our work to do to prove the case and to work with lawyers who play a very valuable role, both defence and prosecutors, to try and get that justice in court. And of course, we want to see that person convicted. I accept that the legal framework is there to test whether that person is guilty or not, and we respect the outcome at the end of the day, whether they are found guilty or acquitted. That's the law, and we respect that. Bending the rules, again, absolutely would not condone it in any way, shape or form. You know, if you don't respect the laws that are laid down in any country, then chaos will reign, as you have absolutely said. So I agree with very much a lot of what you've just said there.
Yep. Counsel, Yannick Stewart.
I'm very happy to hear the sentiments being expressed by the Mr. Director of Change, Mr. Chatterton. However, I have recognized, and there are other colleagues of mine at the criminal bar, I do not want to be unfair, and so I stand corrected if I say it's a new trend. That there is a hostility that's being directed towards lawyers at the RAPF. So what happens? Somebody's arrested, a lawyer's called, and we go to the police station to do an interview. But it's almost as if we are treated as the enemy. It's almost as if, why are you here? And this trend is new, it is recent. There has always been, certainly since I have been practicing for how many years, that we go there and it is understood why we are there. A person is entitled, if they say, I have an attorney representing me, they're entitled to seeing their attorney, and they're entitled to having that attorney being present before they are made to give a statement. They need to know what their rights are. So the police will warn somebody and say, I'm cautioning you based on Rule 2 of the judge's rules. You are not obliged to say anything. Anything you say will be taken down in writing. What does obliged mean? Now, as an attorney, I will, if I'm in an interview room and I say to the officer, can you break that down? I know what obliged means. But why are you not explaining it or speaking to this person who is in the interview room in a manner that they understand, right? And so if I intervene as the lawyer who is present, to either ask the officer to explain it or try to explain it to my client so they understand what it is, because then they're going to be asked to sign that caution statement. Then it's almost as if, why are you disrupting this interview? You are an inconvenience. So that you have said that you want to work with attorneys. We all have our roles. But if that hostility is being directed towards lawyers and we are going there in a professional capacity, I can't imagine what is happening to unrepresented persons at the police station who may not have the protection of an attorney. So that it's a very troubling trend, and those who practice at the criminal bar are aware that there have been incidents at the police station involving, I want to say, new police officers and or attorneys. What John Public may not know because they're not privy to being in the RAPF. And Mr. Chatterton, I am very sorry if this is not the case, but that is, the appearance is that there is one building but two RAPFs. An RAPF, unfortunately, that is a new RAPF that looks more like you, and then there's another one. And there is no interaction. There is a disconnect. So if I deal with a new police officer, I am only dealing with them. I don't see them talking to the other officers. They don't stay at the same place. They don't report to the same superior. So the question is this one RAPF that is a part of the threat? So we speak of community policing, but the community does not know one set of police officers who are in the RAPF. And I am hoping that as Director of Change, there is an understanding that there needs to be some sort of integration. And if there's going to be a change in culture in the RAPF, the change cannot be that there is hostility that is directed at lawyers at the criminal bar. Because the fact of the matter is, if the police, if the work is done properly in the first instance, right, our jobs over here becomes much more difficult. And if you do your job properly, there shouldn't be any fear as it relates to lawyers.
Okay.
Right? Just one more thing,
Yes,
and I'm
very
sorry that
quickly,
I'm taking
because I
up the
have
time.
someone else waiting in the wing here, and then we'll give Mr. Chatterton a chance.
You have persons
to
who
respond.
persons who come into conflict with the law. And you have the state. It's a David and Goliath type of thing. The police has the job, you collect the evidence, and it comes before the court and it is tested. But sometimes there's dishonesty as it relates to that. We are here as lawyers to help to guard against that. And I have seen instances where police officers have taken the witness box and sworn on the Bible and then proceed to lie. Then proceed to lie. And but for the intervention of an attorney, easily this person could have been convicted. And that's why I'm saying that it's so important that there's a recognition that we play an important role in the system. We are not the enemy. There actually is no enemy.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. We're still on the topic, crime and violence causes threats and solutions. Ms. Fountain? You took away your microphone.
Yes. I do have a question.
Okay, yes,
I
please,
do
go
have a
ahead.
question, though. I remember when I did the visits to the school, there was a little boy, and he said to me, "Miss, we can't get the guns through the airport. We can't get the guns through the seaport. So, miss, where are the guns coming from?" Earlier on, Detective Chatterton asked the same question, but we are hoping to get some answers. Yeah. The little boy asked me, and I said I was going to ask the police.
And you're doing the right thing. So over to you, Mr. Chatterton.
Well, in relation to that point, I can hazard a guess. I mean, our borders, let's face it, are very porous. We're an island. There are lots of places where smuggling can take place, I'm quite sure. So if they're not coming, they're here, so if they're not coming via an airport, they're not coming via lawful border crossings, then there's only other one option, isn't there?
But then what are we doing though? Because we all recognize that porous borders. So what is the solution? Because we're here to talk about solutions.
That's right.
And if guns are coming through borders that are porous, how are we going to make them not porous?
Well, I'm delighted to say that we have a maritime police force again at the moment, having been off the sea for some considerable time. We now have a vessel which we are out policing those waters. So that's a good start. But I come back to what I said before. The police are representatives of the community. We need our communities to tell us what's going on. The police, we're about 120 strong. That's all. You know, it's when you look at the amount of courage that's on duty at any one time, it is extremely limited. We can't police the beaches and the borders ourselves. We rely on the public to tell us if they see anything suspicious, then we can act. So if someone sees a boat coming in to a particular cove at certain times of a day or on a particular day and it's suspicious, then that gives us something to work with and we can be focused. Without that, we struggle.
Let me just add here that this is not an attack on the Royal Anguilla Police Force. I want that to be absolutely clear. This is not an attack. This is an open, frank discussion and discourse. Yes, Ms.
Oh, it's just a segue from what Ms. Barrett said. I think we're pressed for time, so we need to start going to solutions. And I think in terms of, we know guns are a problem. If people were, throwing rocks still, we wouldn't have as maybe much injury. Not saying that a rock cannot do damage. So in terms of solution, I mean, down at the Blowing Point Ferry, there's a metal detector thing when you come in, it doesn't work. So you can carry a gun on you. Let's get that working. We have to look for futuristic solutions. There are drones. You cannot police it yourself. Get people with drones, more drones. You can do aerial coverage. Anguilla is an island. It's not a continent. In terms of we're looking solutions, use technology to your advantage, drones, GPS. There are persons on island who have solutions. Put a think tank together of persons who will know how to do these things in terms of, if we say technology is a problem, let's use that same problem to make it a solution. I mean, something just simple as putting on that metal detector, because while they search bags, they do not search people. You can have a firearm on you. Even with, look at solutions like you get sniffer dogs, dogs that know about gunpowder, these things there. So if you cannot use human resources, let's use technology. Let's use other forms of that technology to assist us when we don't have the manpower.
Absolutely correct. And I hear a little word here, money, 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 money. Where is it going to come from? GST.ai. Yes. So anyone else? Please. Yes,
can I just answer some of the points that were, rightly put forward there? So I think the first point is hostility towards lawyers. If a lawyer attends the RAPF and they feel that they've been dealt with in a way that they wouldn't expect to be dealt with, then there is a complaints mechanism, and I would encourage that mechanism to be followed. That's the first point, okay? Because as I said before, no one in interactions with the police should feel that they've been dealt with in an uncivil way or certainly hostility, let alone someone that I've said before we need to work with for the greater good, okay? So that's that point. In terms of two RAPFs, that is absolutely not, okay? We are one united body that answers to the Commissioner of Police, and he has answers to ultimately the Government, Attorney General, etc., etc. Yes, officers have been brought into the UK to provide extra resilience for the reasons which has been clearly articulated this evening. There's an increase in serious crime, there's an increase in sophistication of crime, and those officers bring with them experience which we are sharing and building confidence within the RAPF. The officers work alongside local officers from within RAPF. We rely upon officers within RAPF to teach us things about the force and communities, and that works both ways. So it's a symbiotic relationship in that sense. Definitely not a two-strand RAPF. Officers that lie in court, I mean, that is a worrying thing to say. Obviously, if someone is proven to lie in court, that's perjury, right? So, what happens to those officers?
They should be prosecuted by the RAPF. I don't know that that has happened, even though it's proven to be a lie, but that's another matter.
I would say if it's proven to be a lie, then a police officer is not going to ignore that. If it's proven to be a lie. If you think it's a lie, that's different.
So that it's not addressed.
Yes. Okay, I think we
But,
can explore that
Victor-
some more.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we just need to move on. Let's look at some solutions and so on in the interest of time. Let's get to the solutions. Yeah. Okay. To help to
The other
solutions.
The other observation is that the solution to crime on the island is not only in the hands of the Royal Anguilla Police Force. So I had a lot of solutions, nice solutions too, but everything was just the police have to do this, police have to do that, right? So the Lions spoke about the coaches having to drop off children, part of the solution. I was fortunate to be one of about 8 or 9 persons who were trained under the Cricket West Indies. Had to do with safeguarding of children in cricket. I would think that FIFA would have some kind of program like that for football. Yeah? Pardon me? Yeah, for who? Yeah. Yeah, but then it's not, but then you need to apply it at your level. Because that's supposed to also include when children should come to you and what are the obligations of the parents. Everything should be signed. So you shouldn't be wondering about dropping off kids after practice and all of that. That should be already stated, written out. You should have that as part of your procedures, etc., etc. So if FIFA has it and it's happening at a club level, then you may want to apply it at that level as well. Because I've been dealing with coaches both here for cricket and in St. Martin in particular. Done about 5 or 6 different sessions with them. And it's a must for them in order for them to get their license to coach.
All right.
Yeah, so
Thank
that's
you, Mr.
something we
Richardson.
want to consider.
Thank you very kindly. Quickly, any other solutions in the wider scheme of things? Crime and violence, causes, threats, solutions. Yes, please. Solutions. Any suggestions for solutions we need to get that?
I was going
Members
to
of the panel, please, you're free to weigh in as well.
Yes, go ahead.
You're free to weigh in as well, as it relates to solutions.
So,
Lorraine, you have it? Yes, go ahead.
okay, so as we could talk about solutions all day because there are a myriad of solutions across the board and stuff like that. And for me, I'll always go back to family because it starts at home. And we have to look at preventative measures rather than just concentrating on what the police can do, or else we'll continue to build bigger prisons and all of those other things. And think that those are the solutions. When the solutions start right in the home, in the schools, I think we start too late. We pick up problems, we pick up issues from very young, and we just, we tap it up as, oh, these children are just children. And their behaviors that are missed very early that we can actually cater to. And we do need money for some of these things, so we can't get away from it. We have to acknowledge that we have to put money into systems in order for systems to change. Because we could keep talking about it, but if we don't actually put the resources into it, then it'll continue to be a problem. We have a lot of children that are undiagnosed with a lot of issues, and we really need to start putting money into those so the children can develop. And we were talking about individuals, and children need to grow up, develop as individuals. You can't continue to put children in spaces where they are not. That is not for them. They can't thrive in those situations. Because if I'm not academically inclined and I'm not learning in that environment, I'm going to make trouble in that environment. And I'm going to go outside of the classroom and I'll find people that are more like me. And that's where it starts. And it starts very young, like Marlene and others. We did an anti-violence initiative in the school, and we're dealing with very young children. And the police have a lot of work to do with building trust. Because I have 9 and 10-year-olds telling me they will walk away. Whatever they see, they walk. That's not my business. I'm not getting involved with police. I'm not getting involved with nobody. That is not my business. So they are being taught from very young to stay silent. And they're getting that from the community.
Yeah.
They're getting it from what they are being, the environments they are in. So we have a lot of work to do. It's not the police job, just the police job, just the school job, but it's all of us. Because I think a lot of us we live in a bubble, like it doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect my, that's all your problem. And if we don't get back to the community that we were, then our children will continue to go in ways that we don't like, that we don't want. So it really is a community effort in terms of starting very young. And we have to do it as a collective. We like to say we're too busy. We're too busy to go in schools to have talks. We're too busy to tutor, to have after-school programs. We're just too busy. But busy doing what? Because what is the result of our business? We're losing the fabric of our society within our business. So we're gaining material things, but we're losing souls.
Yeah, powerful. Canon, please. Solutions?
Solutions, yes. I think some have been raised, and 1 or 2 points are made. Promotion of sports. We have to get back to that. Definitely, we have to engage our organizations to get that going. Maybe into church sports, into religious sports, bringing young people, harnessing them together. We have to synergize. I think the point was made earlier, we can't sit in our own little corners. We have to work together, and sometimes we're afraid because we figure when we go to work with somebody else, we're giving up our power. We're giving up our ability for individualism, which is really not the case. What we're doing is that we're coming together as we ought to have been from beginning to work together. Social media plays a very important part for young people, and I think it's an avenue that we don't tap enough. Whether it's the church or the school or maybe other institutions, we don't tap enough. And somehow I think we need to find those things that, you know, sometimes I'm watching something on Facebook and then Digicel pops up and Flow pops up and you have to wait, and even YouTube, how do we get things like those in? Because that is where young people are, TikTok and Instagram. How do we get those in? And of course, it's going to take money. Can we get our business people to sponsor these things? Maybe if we come as a collective and we make representation, because at the end of the day, if crime continues to spiral out of control, businesses are affected. And so we are saying to them, they have an interest in the game as well. They have a stake in the game. And then I think of development, before I move on, radio slots. The radio stations are there. And if it is one thing I think, from my vantage point, is that we don't use radio enough outside of the couple of talk show hosts and people, you know, fighting for their political partisanship. There's so many other slots available, so many slots available. And the final thing I think is to have concerned people beat in the streets, one-on-one. Concerned people must beat the streets because this is a survival of the fabric of our society. And we have to wrestle. We can't give up. We are evolving democracy, and I believe we have to wrestle. We have to fight, because if we give up, then we say we're surrendering, and we can't. Each one of us, we must fight, and I think that is what happens. We must first say, I want this thing to succeed, and we have to keep wrestling and fighting.
Thank you, Canon Reed. Mr. Vanderpool, please.
Yeah, and I would just like to say in relation to school, because there's a question of how do we rehabilitate persons who are recognized, children who are recognized as the troublesome children or those who always get in trouble? How do we rehabilitate them? Most of the times they're sent home on suspension, and after the suspension period is over, they are back in school, in the same environment, around the same children, doing the same things. So what mechanism is now in place in order to prevent someone who was recognized as a troublesome child to make the transition, show them a new light, help them to understand that this is not the way, X, Y, and Z is the way. So I believe actually implementing some kind of strict mandatory mechanism to, you know, stop the go home 2 weeks, come back in the same environment, then they go home again the next 2 weeks, come back in the same environment. So what is there to prevent the repeated troublesome behavior?
Very, very excellent point. Mr. Chatterton, solutions? Then I'll go to Ms. Stewart, and then we'll do a final wrap.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm not demonizing mobile telephones or social media. You know, it plays a significant part in society, and there's no turning back from that clear now. But I do think, and it's been alluded to already this evening, that there needs to be an educational program within our schools to educate our young people who are using mobile phones, that there's many advantages, but they can also be dangerous as well. You know, if you put something on social media, it's indelible, it's there forever, and it could bite you hard in the future when you're applying for a job. Future employees will go back and see things that you posted when you were a young teenager, for example, and that could affect you for the rest of your life. So we have programs in schools now around drugs. I think there should be something there around use of mobile phones. Justice Moyes talked about us, you know, not looking through rose-coloured spectacles about where we are, where we were in the past. And I had a grandfather in the police, and his father as well was in the police, and I'm sure he'd say the same, that, you know, crime's always been there, there's always been fights. But I guess, you know, there are new challenges now. If you had a fight in a school 20 years ago, it was left pretty much at school. Now, that can continue with the use of mobile phones into the night, and it can haunt someone for weeks, because there is no escape from this social media. So I think that educational piece. I think to pick up on your point about you know, deterring people and putting them on a path away from crime, that's that prevent strategy that we talked about before. All the different touch points, I think we all play a significant role to play in that, to recognise that early and try and nip it in the bud while we can, because we'll get to a point where you can't turn that round. And then the final point I'd make is, and it's a blunt one, is in relation to our sentences. You know, are our sentences for serious crime a significant deterrent? I'm not saying they're not, but I've just asked that question. Thank you.
Very good point. Ms. Stewart.
Resources to help struggling parents. Parents need help. They need the support, especially single-parent households, especially households with children that are troublesome children, and they are in the primary schools, they're in the high schools. Parents need assistance with that. So there needs to be some kind of systems in place to assist. The trauma is not just with the children, the parents as well. There are a lot of parents who, they just don't know what to do. They are struggling. So we need to pump the resources behind that and ensure that nobody is left behind. I'm aware there are some children who are leaving school who are barely literate. That is a part of the problem, because there is a direct correlation between that and involvement in criminal activity. So that we need to address that. We need to ensure that every child who is leaving school is literate. That helps. It goes a far way in terms of your understanding and that sense of identity, and not necessarily leading, well, that strong sense of identity helps you as it relates to not engaging or involving yourself in these groups, these negative peer groups, and aligning yourself with the negative peer pressure, the gangs that will then cause you to be back in this space. So we need to ensure that we are catering to the needs of our children. Teachers are tired. We went to the primary schools, teachers are exhausted. If we were in a class for 45 minutes, probably 25 minutes would have been spent trying to say, behave, listen, sit down, pay attention. So how much time is there for the actual learning? So teachers are struggling, so the education system definitely needs to be addressed. And also, when persons come into conflict with the law, there's a way to treat them with dignity. That is a part of the problem, because if you are harassed and you're boxed and you're kicked and you're treated like an animal from the police station or from the point in time when you're arrested, and then you come before the court and it's a similar treatment, there's a dehumanizing effect. So that persons will come into conflict with the law. It may be that person tomorrow. Tomorrow it could be me. So I think we need to always remember the humanity, and it's not about seeming to be complicit or excusing bad behavior, but it's also recognizing that these are human beings. It is human to err. And so we need to always remember that when treating with persons who come into conflict with the law.
I want to thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. We had Mr. Richardson and then Mrs. Banks, and we'll wrap it up there. So go ahead, Mr. Richardson, or you want to give way to Mrs. Banks? Give way to Mrs. Banks.
She got summer better than me.
Okay, all right.
Summarize, doesn't matter. Yeah, I had a point too what a friend from Lions said. Yeah, about resources and support for parents, but I was thinking a little more radical than her. Which will kill two birds for us because we need more our population needs to build. Yeah? So can we give parents incentives, financial and otherwise, to have more children? We're looking at solutions, right? Yeah, I mean, we'll be tackling two problems. Our lack of population, yeah, for what it's worth. The other one is that we need to build a spirit of, go back to building a spirit of community, especially at the village level. I was from North Side, I was from North Valley. There are a number of persons living in my community. Now, almost every day on the road, I see somebody new. I don't know who they are. So we need to build that, again, as the spirit of community. Maybe start by establishing community council, I call them councils, you could use a different name, to involve an umbrella group at the community level that embodies and reflects the composition of the community, which also includes those persons who have come in, non-Anguillians, who have come in part, but they are now part of the community. So it must reflect that. Then, yeah, sports will come out of that. Then, I don't know how to say this, but maybe we need to conduct frequent conducting of surveys, social surveys. Do we do them properly, whatever the issues are, on a regular basis? So, so we get proper, reliable, and valid statistics. Because tonight, the number of persons over there, Lindsay might have been a good person to help us with some stats. And the reasons, when I say Lindsay, I know at the prison, yeah. And then from a church perspective, build and encourage the establishment of the family altars. Meaning, parents, the family need to sit down, whether morning, or at the dinner table, or at nighttime, engage in discussion and prayer, supporting each other.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Dr. Banks? Yeah. No, it seems to be off.
Time to go.
Okay, you're good, you're good.
Well, good evening. I just want to say thank you to the Bar Association and to the panelists and for the very interactive and deep discussions. I think some of the themes that we had heard echoed throughout the evening had to do with socialization and resocialization, as well as resources, in particular financial resources, because we're living here still, where will this money come from? Where will the resources come from? And we also talked about romanticizing the past. And we must very much remember that these societies that we exist in right now, they were born in violence. They were created in violence. And the violence was created in order to sustain and build a capitalist society, which is the materialism that we talk about, where the church was used and the law was used, and all these were used to support this economic thrust. And so, because we are at the end of this, We have to remember that. And we are still in a colonial situation where even if our governments or we as people say we want to invest in sport, we are the people who are taking children home, or parents who are doing these things where somebody is paid to do that, then no, we don't have any money to do that, we can't spend like that, we can't do that, because we are a colonial society and we really don't govern ourselves. And so we must always take in mind that that imperialistic, colonial, that with the tinges of racism and all the rest of it that continue to exist within our societies. And then when you take social media and you look at the way the world is going, where the justification for the ideologies that supported racism and all those ideologies which continue to boost capitalism, and if we want to create a very safe, violence-free country, what do we do? Well, long discussions, we have more to talk about. What about the Nordic, the Scandinavian models, where, you know, so we hear some of our people talking about the amount of money that goes into education, into social services, where parents, education, parenting, and all those things are free at the point of contact, healthcare, etc. How do we do this? We need money, yes, we need resources, human resources, as well as financial resources. And a lot of us get very scared when we start to talk about reparations. When we start to talk about reparations, and it goes back to what were our societies built on? It was built on grabbing that materialistic capitalist thrust that built those economies, and now they say to us, well, you want handouts, and even our people are afraid to say or even consider that we do need reparations, because many other communities and ethnic groups have had reparations, but we, in this part of the world, we think that, oh, no, we need to stand on our own. We can never get the financial resources to stand on our own and build the communities that are free of violence when we are still steeped in the same ideologies and the same ideas that created and birthed societies out of violence. So we need to start there, and there's a lot to talk about, but no time.
I want to thank you so very much, and what a wonderful note to end it on. I will now turn it over to the president of the Anguilla Bar Association to put the cap on tonight's activity. Over to you, Ms. Barrett.
A lot has been said tonight. Thank you, Mr. Graves, for leading us in this very important discussion. We have said a lot. There is still a lot more to be done. We have offered solutions. Will we allow those solutions to just be something we say here tonight and it goes no further from here? When I had that discussion with our children, I gather that there was a disconnect. For our children, there is a disconnect between what we, the adults, are telling them and what they see. And because there is a disconnect between what we're telling them and what they're seeing out there, they have decided that I am going to do what I see, not what we're telling them. They know that conflict resolution is good. They know that they're supposed to walk away. But instinctively, when we spoke to them, all of them were fighting back. All of them. And they have strategies. 10 and 11-year-olds have strategies. Either they learn them at home, they see them on the internet, or they see them play out in our society, they have strategies. They're not talking to those in authority unless they are forced to. They're not talking to the police. They're drinking water and minding their own business. That's where we're at. So we're going to have to do something different. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results. We need money. We need people who are willing to put in the work. We need parents who are prepared to parent the child they have, not the child they wanted. The teachers are tired. For real, the teachers are tired. I think some of them have just given up. And the young ones, one little boy said, "Miss, anybody trouble me, I just body slam them? What's going to happen? I'm going to get suspended and I go home and I spend 2 weeks and I come back to school." Mr. Vanterpool spoke about it. What is it that's going to be there to divert them from that course? Because they're thinking, yes, you're going to suspend me, but I'm going to come back to school. I get to stay home and watch YouTube all day. Parents, teachers, church, police, lawyers, social workers. We all have a lot to do. And I'm hoping that tonight is only one in a series of discussions that we will have on this issue. Because unless we're prepared to do something, I'm not looking forward to the stats for 2025. So we have to do something. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have work to do. So let us resolve that when we leave here, we're going to take back Anguilla. We're going to take back Anguilla. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for contributing. Thank you all for being willing to be a part of this discussion and a part of this solution. Let us resolve to continue to do that. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.